Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast, co-hosted today by yours truly, Cory Miller. Ryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. I can't wait to dive into this episode. We're going to get into goal setting, what we learned from Collective Genius, and then how we implemented it into what we call our one-page plans. So if you're into goal setting, target setting, you want to achieve big things, you want to be successful, here is the framework that we use with not only ourselves, but our team members too.
And why is that important?
It's important because what gets measured gets done. And when you write something down, it becomes real.
Well, when we have the opportunity to write things down, it makes it tangible at that point, right?
Right. It triggers your subconscious mind of like, this is a thing, right? It's not a thought anymore because thoughts are fleeting. We have how many thoughts a day?
Thousands.
Thousands of thoughts a
Sure.
day. Right. So when we write it down on paper, there's an intentionality that comes with that triggers a subconscious mind. And I think most people that struggle with the idea of success is because they allow their goals to be thoughts of like, well, that would be great someday if I could do that. Oh, it'd be super cool if I could quit my job and live life on my terms and achieve financial freedom and do all the things in life that I want to do, but I'll get there someday. Then you have no actions that help get you there, right? Then that 6 months go by and you think the same thing and you're no closer to your goal. So we have created what we call at Offer Now Idaho our Blueprint for Success, a one-page life plan document. This is a takeaway we had from CG, from Collective Genius, the mastermind that we're in. You want to talk about that?
So this is something that had come up and was presented on based on the book, The Dream Manager.
Okay.
And so it was an adaptation from that was presented on in Q4 of last year. And a couple of the teams took that, ran with it, brought it into their business, and they wanted to come back and share the success that they'd had. And so CG, great for a lot of things. This is really around how do you develop a culture and how do you commit to people so that way they're committed to you and your business.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, how is this different? Because both you and I do goal setting annually with our spouses.
Yes.
How is this different from that?
The biggest difference I saw in it is most of the time when you try to do goal setting, it's on a yearly basis. Most people, my experience has been, don't think out into the future and really give themselves targets that are far enough out that they can feel unachievable now. And that was a big piece of the book, The Dream Manager, which was all about how do you give people the framework, how do you encourage them to think about their future, to dream about their future, then they can start acting on it once they've realized that concept. And so the difference for me is that whenever my wife and I would sit down and plan at the end of the year, beginning of the next, it would be, what do we want to accomplish next year? And then for us, we actually did like a 5-year plan, but it was very loose. It was, okay, what are a couple of big hitter things that we want our finances to look like or our family structure to look like? And we would go through that for about 5 years. And then the next year we'd look at it and say like, well, where did we make progress and where do we move out on the timeline? But most people don't do that.
Yeah.
They're not encouraged to do that.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here is like, how do we, which I think that's a really good step one. If you're not doing that with your spouse, the annual goal setting session, we've talked about that on prior episodes, essential, right? To get on the same page, to be moving in the same direction, to have support, right? You're supporting her in what she wants. She's supporting you in what you want. But now we're talking about getting a level even more tactical than that about like, well, what can I do today? What are actions that I can take today that give me a greater likelihood of achieving what I've set out here? And that's the purpose of the one-page plan, right? It's about taking these big ideas and like really chunking them down into actionable things that we can do.
Yeah. So let's talk about that framework and at least how we're going through it with our employees and how we went through it ourselves.
Yeah.
Unless there's any other takeaways you want to talk about from CG first.
No, just that I think a lot of times the whole purpose of this podcast, and we're sharing this with you guys, is we've done goal setting and target setting for like 5 years. I know I have.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you don't know what you don't know. And so then when you get in a room of people that are doing it at a high level, you don't even know, like, what do you mean? Goal setting is goal setting. There's not levels to goal setting. Like, you can't be better at target setting or goal set. Like, it's just a thing that you do, right? No, there are levels to this. And so when you get with in a room of people that are doing something at a really high level, all of a sudden it really opens your eyes to the potential of this. So if you're listening to this, that's why we're sharing this, is because we kind of had this revelation of like, yeah, we do goal setting and target setting, but this is just a whole nother dimension to it, right? This is like something that actually gets people excited and more bought in to doing it.
Yes, exactly. The way that this is, and I'm sure that maybe there'll be like a PDF shared afterwards,
Sure.
but the way that this is structured is how do we keep it really simple? How do we give someone the ability to look at their life and say, like, what do I want? And there's different ways you can go about this, but the goal always has to be big and in mind. And so from this sheet, it starts at 10 years. What can you accomplish in 10 years? What do you want your life to look like a decade from now? And we have that broken down into 4 different things, which is fulfillment, family, finance, and fitness. Now, there's different ones on here that include different wording for that, but those were, for us, we thought resonated the most. And then you pick one of those categories 10 years from now, and what do you want to do? Do you want to be able to run 10 triathlons, or do you want to do whatever that is? And that's for each person to choose. And then they can start to work that back into a 3-year goal. I can start to picture 3 years. 10 years can be really challenging. And then from 3 years, how do I bring that back to 1 year? From there, what do I need to do within the next 90 days? And there's a change in wording where it's not a goal, it's a habit. What's the 90-day habit that can help you get to your 1-year goals along the way to your 3-year, along the way to your dreams?
So I think what's interesting about that is you're not starting with 90 days from now. You are starting from 10 years from now and then working your way to today instead of starting with today and working your way to 10 years. Why?
I don't think anything would change if you did that, because the goal is to get to something you don't have now. And how do you get to something you have now? You have to change what you're doing. You have to change some habit, some process, or commit to doing a different habit or process for an extended period of time. And so that is, it was part of, again, the book, The Dream Manager, which is like, give somebody like a goal and then watch as they start to progress towards it, and then help them along the way and encourage that. And so for me, the big mindset shift in going through that book was that when you're in high school, when you're in college, when you're a kid, people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? All the time. I want to be a race car driver, a firefighter, whatever that is.
NASCAR.
Hell yeah. But Ryan, how many times, maybe outside of, maybe in a work environment, how many times did your managers ever ask you that in a corporate environment?
0. Did you send that email? Did you get the project done? When is the due date for this? That's literally like all the conversations. And then once a year, you'd get to sit down with your manager and talk about your annual raise, and they'd use this completely bullshit subjective 9-box thing. You know the 9-box? Where it's
we had different systems, but yeah.
Okay. But it's all kind of the same point where like you have 9 boxes, like a tic-tac-toe board, right? And then on one side is like effort level, and then the other side I think is like tactical or like experience level. And then based on whether you exceeded expectations, met expectations, or below expectations, you get marked off where you are on that 9-box thing. Okay. And the problem with that is, number one, the frequency that it happens once a year. So by the time you get into it, you feel like your manager's just fucking making shit up. We've all been in those corporate environments. I've actually seen my manager do this. I'm so glad you brought this up because it's bringing up brain damage for me of what I hate about companies that are not run correctly, right? And don't empower their people and lose their A players because they operate like this. But I specifically remember when it came time for annual reviews, your managers would like lock themselves in a room for 48 hours or whatever and type them all out, right? And it was almost like they were trying to like, they'd send off emails to the coworkers to get feedback, right? And then like, so then they condense everything from an entire year into like whatever was top of mind for them in those last 48 hours. And that's what you would get graded by. And it was so dumb. It was so dumb. And it was, here's how we graded you on your performance. It was nothing about what do you want to achieve. Maybe they'd ask you about like, what kind of career path do you want? But it was never like, well, here's things that you can do within the next 90 days to get there or to accomplish that. So that was definitely a long-winded rant of me, but I could not stand like how excited I was going into those kind of conversations about personal development and growth, and then how deflated I felt after the conversation. Because I could tell that my managers just winged it because it was once a year and they were just checking a box. Like they did not genuinely care about me. So applying this, there's a reason it's called the Dream Manager. This has been a big step in my growth and in my leadership is like when you start a business, you have to understand in order to get what you want, you have to help everybody else get what they want first, not the other way around. And everybody does it the other way around, right? So that's hard because as a leader, you eat last. And there's a lot of sacrifice that goes in that. There's a lot of risk that goes in that. There's a lot of anxiety and all the fun things that come with entrepreneurship. But like you truly, like in order to get what you want, you have to help everybody else get what they want first. And this, one of the big actions from this was I decided I'm going to do this with every member of my team once a quarter, regardless of what their level is. I didn't used to do that before. You used to do that, or whoever their manager would used to do that. But when the CEO is invested in their future growth, I think that sends a completely different message for how people are treated and how they feel. I wish I had known that earlier. I wish I had done it earlier.
This is why we go to masterminds to pick things up.
Yeah.
And actually, my question for you is, you actually just had an opportunity to go through one of these with our employees.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned how you felt on the other end of that in the corporate environment. What was different being in that seat going through something like this just over the weekend?
Yeah, so I went through this with one of our sales guys over the weekend, and you know that you're on the right track when you get a text immediately after the conversation, which was like an hour and a half, and we went through the 1 year, the 3 year, the 10 year, the 90-day plan, and you get a text saying, "Thank you so much. I know that you don't have to do that. And I've been other places in the past where that was just a complete waste of time and a bunch of fluff. And I can tell that you genuinely care and the intentionality is there. So thank you." And it's like, oh, that's what leadership is. And that's what leadership feels like.
That's really powerful.
Yeah. So it's absolutely validation for me that I'm on the right track and I'm doing the right thing as a leader. What I love about it too is the level of fulfillment. It's the coolest. Yes, all the things that you get from business and financial freedom are great, but to be able to actually meaningfully change somebody's life and their family tree trajectory forever. I mean, we're talking big time life change, huge, setting people up for a new path that they never even thought was possible. And then specifically with this sales guy that I met with this weekend, all of a sudden his spouse is our biggest cheerleader and supports him. And I know it's a direct result of conversations that he's had with her, but then the intentionality of doing these exercises. He can show her, like, look, not only am I producing results, am I producing, money to pay the bills, but like this is the fulfillment that I'm after, and you're a major part of this, right? Fulfillment, family, finances, fitness. Doesn't say me, all those boxes, right? There's something about it that just totally fills up your cup as a business owner, where to help people change what they thought they could be and achieve things that they never really dreamed of is there's something incredibly special about that.
And it's going to feel uncomfortable for the people who are doing it. And one thing I took away from, shout out to Jimmy Vreeland, he did the first presentation after he read this book, is that he said with his organization, all his leadership team did it. And then they pushed it down the next level. Like 60 or 70% did the exercise. And even those who did, most of them didn't actually finally finish everything. And he's like, and you're just going to have to accept that. But you do it a few times and people get more bought in. And then hopefully they talk to the other coworkers about what their hopes and their dreams are. And that was a big piece of the book, is like, if you can start to create a culture where people talk about the future, they're a lot more bought into doing the work now because they can all see the intentionality and the progress.
Absolutely love that. It's so true. It's just like the first time we did our goal setting with our spouse.
I was like pulling teeth.
I know Julia was like, she was like, what in the hell are you doing? Like, this is stupid. And not because she really did want to have goals, but she was afraid to keep us accountable because she was afraid of falling short and what that would feel like as a failure. And so I think it is really all around the frame of reference of like, just because we put this stuff on the 1-page plan and the blueprint for success, if things change or you don't, other priorities come up, like you can change them. Just change them. That's all. So I thought it would be super helpful for the audience if you get a little bit vulnerable, Cory, and go through your 1-page plan.
Sure.
Or parts of it. So do you want to start with your 10-year goals?
And so I'll go with fulfillment first. And so mine's actually very much family related. And so fulfillment, raise kids who have a strong sense of family, friendship, and giving back to the community. And then under family, I had a loving family, 3 healthy kids whose lives I'm intimately involved in. That word was intentional because I want to be a part of their lives as they grow up and be able to see how they can progress and become great adults. And then the other part was to be able to spend time with my parents while they're still around, my brother's extended family. When I say extended family, that also goes to like really good close friends that I've grown to view as family as well. As far as finances, increasing net income over 500K, 5 million in assets, 20K a month in passive income. Some of those are going to be easier to hit than others. And then
500K a year?
A year.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I want to have a property per child that is paid off and in their name by the time they turn 18. So that's a big one for me because I love that. I think I got it from Rand and Turner on the Bigger Pockets podcast, and it's been stuck in my mind since I started getting into real estate investment as a really good way to teach them lessons about business and set them up for success. And so that's the goal, is to have one of those per child, which is going to be a big thing to accomplish and get that all paid off by that time.
And fitness?
Yeah. So I said, this is going to sound really lame, but it's to be able to do a Murph workout in under 52 minutes.
It's not lame.
Which is a 2 miles run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, and 300 air squats.
I love it.
Yeah.
How old are you going to be in 10 years?
Oh, God, I'm going to be 44.
44? Dude,
Yeah.
You'll be able to do that. Come on.
Oh, totally. I feel like I'm creaking.
With a weighted vest you need to put on there.
That's actually, that would be a much more ambitious goal to do that with a weighted vest.
At Offer Now Idaho, we're looking to hire A players to run our organization and help us grow our business. What's your favorite part about working at Offer Now Idaho?
I would say it's the culture. I really enjoy the people that we have here. They want to grow. They want to become better versions of themselves. They're hard charging. We're all pushing each other to be better. We're not 2 different teams competing on the same battlefield. We're one team practicing because we have a goal of helping 1 million people over the next 10 years. That's a big number. We can have an impact on people's lives while we're on that journey. And the work that you might do year 1 or in month 1 is going to have a positive impact on that family for the next decade. And that's huge.
The growth potential that we have, I mean, we could easily 2 or 3x here in the next few years with what we've built, the type of people that we've attracted, and the type of people that we're going to attract. This thing is headed for the moon, and we have so many vacancies, and we need your help to fill them. Right now, we have a $3,000 referral program. If you know somebody that's looking for a new role, we will pay you $3,000 once that person is hired by us and they hit their 90-day mark. So if you know of anybody that's looking for a new job or looking to change their life, shoot me a DM at RealRyanWeimer on Instagram.
Let's get it. And so then for each of those, then I took and I broke it down into 3-year, 1-year, and 90-day habits.
Actually, before you move into the 3-year, one of the questions on the sheet, which guys, DM me the word 1-page plan, and I'll send you a blank copy of the one we use, so you can use it to fill out for yourself and your team, and with your spouse, preferably. But there's 4 questions on here. I want to hit on one of these as it pertains to the 10-year goals, because these are supposed to be the big ones, right? The ones you think about, oh, that would be nice to have someday. So one of the questions on here is, what do you think is impossible?
Yeah, that's such a big one.
What did you put?
I put living a life of abundance without sacrifice to get there.
Said another way is?
I don't know what you're going for.
Well, I think that says it requires sacrifice to get what I want.
Yes.
Right? So it's impossible to not sacrifice and still end up with all the things that you want and the life that you want.
Yes.
Why'd you put that?
You know, I'd say in my personal growth journey, when I used to think about goals, there were a lot of, it'd be nice to have. Oh, wouldn't it be nice? Great thing in the future, like you were saying. And the more I have gone through this transition, the more I realize that most everything is attainable, just depends on how many things you can say no to. and what you want to say no to. And the things you say no to are going to change over time as well, because they're going to have less priority as your focus increases. However, that's really uncomfortable. and I think Alex Hormozy does a great job of talking about this in a lot of his content, where like you are going to feel alone and ostracized, and the people that you used to connect with about certain things aren't going to think the same way. And that's kind of what was going through my mind when I put that on there.
Okay. When people are starting with the 10-year goals, are you the kind of person that sets goals that you think are completely unachievable so that you will end up 80% of the way there, and that's way further than you would have if you set them lower? Or are you the kind of person that sets them at where you think is achievable?
Yeah, personally, and I'm not going to say this is the right way to do it.
Okay.
I get a lot of fulfillment out of checking boxes. And so for me, knowing that I'm like, I can absolutely get there and I will be so content and satisfied, even though I know I'm going to move the goalpost in the future, but to put it on paper and then when I get there to say I checked the box, for me brings more fulfillment. And so I put something that's attainable.
That's your engineer brain.
Yes, it is.
It's funny because I'm the exact opposite.
Yes.
Which is probably why I'm in the seat that I'm in.
Yeah, and so you'll get further setting big, audacious, hairy goals that feel unattainable and impossible. So there's definitely mindset discuss around that. But that's part of why what you heard in there is in there.
Okay. And then I think just for the sake of this exercise, the 3-year goals, you don't need to go through them individually because looking at them, they're roughly the same, but did you kind of just divide your 10-year goals into 3?
Well, that would be too simple.
But is that the framework that people should use though? Or how should they begin to now shrink this down into something that's closer?
I think you can accomplish a lot more over a 5 or 10 year horizon than we generally think. But in the 1 year, it's usually a lot harder. And so when I was thinking about that, I was kind of thinking like it was like an exponential graph that would ramp up. So I probably did not divide it into third for most of these. Most of these are actually probably like 20 to 30% of the way there. I guess 30 would be a third, but probably about 20% of the way there, and then they would ramp up over time.
Okay. How about the 1 year? Because that is definitely more near term.
Much more near term. This is where like it becomes less of like goals and more of planning. I actually struggle with these ones more because then I have to match what my current reality is with where I want to go. And then that's where the actual change in habits have to happen.
Yeah, that's where most people feel the friction,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of like, oh no, I don't want to write it down because then if I fail, then I'm going to feel poopy about myself.
Yes. We don't want to feel poopy about ourselves.
So why don't you share your 1 years?
Yeah. So for me, I said for fulfillment, which is grow in a deeper understanding of who I am. And for me, that comes back to a lot of personal development. And then I'll talk about the habit for that. And so the habit for that is, and a lot of these I put just platinum rule, which is like treat others how they want to be treated. And for me, getting into sales, that has become much more evident that that's required more so than the golden rule, how I want to be treated. So it's read at least one book per quarter that I can listen to and implement. The hard part's the implementation, not the listening, not the reading. When it came back to family, it's being very intentional for me with spending a weekend with my parents and traveling with my wife. So I put dedicated goals, time bound on there for within a year and how much travel we'd be doing.
Love it.
And for personal fitness, it's putting on there a specific weight that I want to be at by the end of the year. That's easy to measure.
And finances?
And finances, $1.5 million in net assets, and buy a multifamily property with at least $75K of equity in it.
And personal income?
And personal income over $200K.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how do we take those 1 year goals and actually make them actionable? So then you go to the top section here, which is the 90-day habits. And here are the questions that need to be answered.
Yeah.
How do you get there?
This is where it becomes a lot more actionable.
Yeah.
So then I talked about the fulfillment one with reading and implementing books. And so for fitness, for me, it's sweat every single day. And then I put a target for the first 90 days, a weight I want to get under by that time. And then with the family, and this is cheating a little bit because part of this is already in the works, but plan at least one dedicated weekend with my parents. within the next 90 days. And so get that on the books, get it on the calendar, plan it out in the future so that way it's something we can look forward to. And then the finances piece is actually a little different because the finances, part of that was a net income as a family. And so it's instituting monthly health checks with my wife, which is not something we do monthly. We do it at our yearly planning goals sporadically, but it's not consistent. So those are the big ones.
So was that uncomfortable?
Yeah, it should be.
Like which one, if you could be vulnerable, which one of those, when you're going from your year to the 90-day habits, which one of those felt most uncomfortable for you and why?
Doing the financial health checks on a more consistent basis.
Why?
The biggest reason behind that is we don't do it right now. And we have different concepts of money. And I love talking about finances and money. And it's not something that is her favorite thing to talk about in the world. And so getting it to be something that's more proactive and consistent is a tough conversation to have every day.
So the monthly health checks.
Yeah.
I think that this is a pretty common thing with couples is like finances is a friction point. What are some ways that somebody that's like, I don't even know how to get my wife to agree to like some kind of goal setting session or let alone a financial health check? Like how do I go from 0 to 1 here? Or not just your wife, your spouse, your husband, a loved one that you want to do this with, whatever.
That's a really tough one. I can just say for us what we did. It didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of conversations sitting around in the car, driving to go to a hike or whatever, where I'd bring things up and we'd start to talk about finances. And where it started to get more actionable for us was that proactively I brought it up that I wanted to have that discussion. And I put it on the calendar and we said, okay, it's just going to be a one-time thing. Okay, we're going to do the goal setting. We're going to have this and it's going to be one of our buckets. And I just kind of forced the issue to say, like, I think this is something that would be really helpful. Let's just try it. And then we ended up doing like kind of like a date night around it to make it a little more, I don't know, easier to stomach or just more fun and more enjoyable to look at.
You change your environment. That's a big part of it because then it becomes like a thing. You know what I mean? It's like something to look forward to.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times for our spouses, if they're not really bought in, it can feel like a chore unless you're like doing a complete removal of environment and changing that. Then it becomes more of like an outing and like an event.
Mm-hmm. And so we got that on the calendar the very first time. And actually what really helped is none of the people that I listen to, she likes to listen to. So none of the podcasts that I think are impactful, she would think were impactful. But what it did start is actually the process of encouraging her to find a podcast on financial health from a woman that was in like a millennial, and she resonated with that communication style more so than anyone I provided. And that actually was the biggest turning point from having it be something that I was trying to encourage to something that we both could collaborate on.
What was that?
The actual podcast? I have no idea.
You don't know?
No,
okay.
I don't. I wish I did. But no, she started following, I think it ended up being like she listened to a podcast and then she followed him on Instagram. And then there was a bunch of these like millennial financial health check-in things. And I was just happy she was doing it. I didn't really care how. I just was happy she was doing it. And then it allowed us to have better conversations afterwards and get things on the calendar.
Love it. How does leading a life of fulfillment to support your family, this is what you put for your why, right? How do you tie all this in to your why? Like, did you actually write down your why first and then jump to the 10-year? Or did you actually start with your 10-year and then craft that?
Yeah, let's talk about these other ones in here because there's 4 different boxes, which is core values and beliefs, what's your why, what do you think is impossible, and then your unique ability.
Yep.
I started with the top left quadrant before I did anything else. I don't know if it felt easier to do, but that's just where I started. But I thought that also helped kind of guide some of the other conversation. I started with my values and beliefs first. And then afterwards, I went to the why. And then afterwards, I went to unique ability. And then there's a little section here for what's your economic engine, what drives your finances.
Okay.
And so that was how I approached it. Curious, when you did it for yourself, did you follow that same order?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually start with the 10-year stuff first, and then I do this stuff last. Because I feel like sometimes I don't really know. until I get into it. And then I'm like writing stuff down. I'm like, I don't really want that. Well, I do want this. And that the culmination of all those kind of helps me determine what my why is. I think most people start with the why and then they do the targets and the goals. I'm actually the opposite. Because that's been a hard one for me is I don't really love that question because there's not always a clear why, and that's okay. And like that why is going to change in different parts of your life. And so that actually is not really my guiding compass when I filled this out. That's just me. And that's the beauty of this.
There's no right way to do it.
Yeah.
And there was another terminology, and I can't remember what they called it. Was it like the rock or there was some other terminology that I think Stephanie Betters had talked about trying to use as like their guiding principle. And it was like the mission. What was the big mission? And for some people, that's like from Offernow, Idaho to like help 1 million people, right? And so you can craft that into what's your why. But I agree, it's tough.
So I got 3 final questions for you.
Yeah.
We'll go rapid fire.
Okay.
Do you think these are big enough?
Ooh, probably not.
Okay.
And I'll tell you the other concept from the Dream Manager that I took away, which is like, if you feel like something is impossible, you just need to think on a longer time horizon. So it's scary and hairy to try to get somewhere within 3 years that feels like it's a big change from where we're at today. But if you put that out on like a 20-year or 25-year time frame, it looks a lot more attainable. So sometimes you just have to put it into a different bucket but still put it on paper to know that it's what you want to accomplish.
All right. How did it feel when you and I went through this yesterday?
It's interesting whenever you share the things that are in your head with other people. It helps provide some clarity going through them and also challenge like ideas and beliefs. And I think, like as you said there, like, do they feel big enough? Like that's the point of having somebody else there, is like to try to say, I see more of you than you see of you.
Last question. What would prevent you from achieving this?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just lack of focus over a consistent enough period of time.
So what does that mean? Saying yes to other things and other opportunities or other,
yeah,
what does that mean?
Shiny object syndrome, maybe different priorities change over time. If something big happens in life, deviation.
Like what's something you've had to say no to recently that you didn't want to?
Yeah, sometimes it's just simple things like weekend family gatherings that I'm like, I can't do that. Or with friends that would be like, 5 years ago, I would have gone and done that on a weekend and I chose not to. Little things like that. Where I think it gets bigger is like Alex Hormozy uses like the woman in the red dress analogy.
Yeah.
But it's like, ooh, wouldn't it be fun to get into this one investment strategy? Like, shouldn't we all be doing long-term, crypto exchanges?
Well, and for those people that don't know, the woman in the red dress analogy, it's a scene in The Matrix, right? Where he sees this just knockout 10 out of 10 woman in the red dress. And it's just a total distraction, right? It's like a mirage. And so, yeah, insert crypto thing here or
great, I want to get into storage complexes now because I think they've got a really good cash flow and they're really safe and it sounds new and shiny and like I want to go invest in that. Or like a year ago, we were talking about expanding out a virtual assistant service and we put a lot of energy into that. We're like, oh my gosh, this is totally something we could do, which is absolutely true.
But just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, it means it's a distraction sometimes. Even though you're like, oh, it can add to the bottom line, but like, what are you losing? What's the opportunity cost of that?
Well, in closing, what I want to say is it's my job as a leader to help you get there and to achieve these. And so I am going to keep you accountable to these. I hope that's what you want. Mm-hmm. But I think they're set a little bit low, but that's okay. We'll get there. We'll expand the top line goal setting and what people think is possible. I think that's the number one thing, right? Is like we overestimate what we can accomplish in a year and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. Mm-hmm. And I think you'll find when you keep this somewhere that 100% comes true.
And it's okay to move the goalposts.
Yeah. Well, it's okay to change. That's why we're going to meet quarterly on this with every employee, right? Because the first question I ask when on a quarterly update is which ones have changed and why. And let's talk through that. One actionable thing from yesterday, right? Regarding fitness, just to pick an example. Meal delivery service. That's not something you've ever done before.
No.
great way to not only get your time back, but also to be eating like really good stuff and putting good stuff in your body that can aid you in your fitness goals or weight loss or your energy levels, right? That's just one thing that can come out of a conversation like that. So I need to send you, I finally got the name from Julia, so I can send that to you. But
Thank you.
anything you want to leave the listeners with in closing?
You don't have to get it right, but going through the exercise is going to prompt the conversation that hopefully changes the mindset over time. And so there is no right answer to whatever you want, but the wrong answer is to not put time and effort into thinking about it.
Yeah. Avoiding this will definitely not help you achieve your goals quicker, right? So this is what it starts with. The first time you do it, it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's the point.
Yeah.
So, all right. 1-page plan session in the books. This has been the Real Freedom Podcast. Thank you, Cory, for being vulnerable with yours. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.